Building a seven-figure business is hard, but what if you built an empire instead? A portfolio of small, boring businesses you own but don't operate. This might sound like something reserved for experienced CEOs. It's actually the easiest path to $1 million a month that almost nobody is talking about. Tom was running an agency, but the agency had been running him into the ground lately. Recently, he met a guy making almost 6 figures a month painting white lines on parking lots. One part-time employee, no marketing, no sales calls, just a stripe machine and commercial property owners who had no choice but to keep calling him back. Tom had always assumed that $100,000 a month meant at least 20 people on payroll, clients calling on Sunday nights expecting immediate answers, and a calendar that hadn't had a free afternoon in 3 years. This guy had a stripe machine and a schedule. That was it. That broke something in Tom's thinking, in a good way, because if one person could build that with a stripe machine, what would happen if you built 10 of them? Not 10 parking lot stripers, 10 businesses running on the same logic, minimal operations, built-in demand, cash flowing whether you show up or not. Anyone can start building assets like that. They don't even have to be physical businesses. Digital assets can cost as little as $27 to get started, and the same principles apply. But Tom wanted to understand the sequence first. How do you get from one unit to a portfolio? How do you go from interesting to life-changing? That's what this video's about. The fastest way to build a $1 million a month empire is to stop trying to build one business to that size. Build something worth $15,000 a month instead. Install someone to run it. Collect what's left. Then do it again. By the time you've done it 8 times, the number is there. No single business is complicated. No individual unit requires you. The empire isn't the businesses. It's the sequence between them. Tom didn't know that sequence yet. He just knew he was done grinding. So he bought a used stripe machine instead, and 5 years later, he was doing $1 million a month. No staff to manage, no clients to answer to, no Sunday night phone calls. This is how he did it. The first job paid $2,800. It took 36 minutes. Tom had borrowed a stripe machine from a guy he'd met through the parking lot owner who'd connected him to Marcus. One morning, 7 a.m., an empty parking lot outside a strip mall in Austin. The machine laid down the first line and Tom thought, I just made about $300 a minute. That's not how it works at scale, obviously. You're not making $300 a minute 40 hours a week, but the unit economics were unlike anything he'd seen in the agency. One machine, one operator, one invoice, no scope creep, no revision request, no client who loved the strategy deck and then disappeared for 3 weeks. You paint the lines are painted, you get paid. The thing Tom kept coming back to was the word Marcus had used when they first talked: mandatory. Parking lot striping isn't optional for commercial property owners. It's a code violation if the lines fade past a certain point, which means Marcus didn't sell anything. He showed up on the schedule, did the work, sent the invoice. His clients weren't choosing him because they admired his brand. They were calling him because the law required someone to call. Tom spent the first 2 months doing every job himself. Not because he had to. He could have hired someone from day one. He did it because he wanted to understand the business before he handed it to anyone. What broke? What clients actually cared about? Which jobs ran long? Where the margins compressed? By month 3, he was clearing about $12,000 a month after materials and equipment. He had 6 recurring commercial clients and a wait list of 2 more. He was also still the one painting the lines. For Tom, though, the next problem wasn't finding more work. It was figuring out how to leave the work he already had. The move almost nobody makes is not the first business. It's what you do after the first business starts working. Most people, when something is making money, do the sensible thing. They keep doing it. Tom was making good money running the stripe machine. The jobs were coming in. The margins were clean. He could have worked harder, hired help, done more jobs per week. That's the obvious move. That's also the ceiling. What Tom did instead looked like a bad decision. He took someone he'd been paying $12 an hour as a helper and spent 6 months turning that person into him. Showed him how to quote, how to handle a missed appointment, which clients called back and which ones you had to nudge, how to deal with a machine breaking mid-job on a Tuesday morning. He handed over the whole thing, piece by piece, until there was nothing left that required Tom. His margin dropped by about 40%. Most business owners look at that number and stop. 40% is a lot. If you're making $15,000 a month and an operator costs you $6,000 of it, you're left with $9,000. Why would you do that on purpose? Here's why. Because $9,000 a month that runs without you is not the same thing as $15,000 a month that requires you to show up every day. One of those is income. The other is an asset, and an asset can do something income never can. It can fund the next one. Tom called this the extraction. Not delegation. Extraction. He was extracting himself from the business so the business could become capital. The Stripe machine didn't stop making money when Tom left. It kept going. And Tom went and found the next thing. 3 days after the operator took over, Tom checked his phone. A payment had come in. $1,400 for a job he hadn't touched. He sat with that for a while. Not celebration, more like proof. Something had changed that couldn't be undone. That is the move. Not the first business. Not the growth. The moment you stop being the thing the business needs to function. Everything before that is a job. Everything after it is a portfolio. He didn't save up to buy the laundromat. The Stripe machine bought it for him. $9,000 a month in free cash flow, compounding over 8 months, gave Tom enough to put a down payment on a small laundromat in South Austin. 12 machines. Open 20 hours a day. The previous owner had run it for 11 years and wanted out, not because it was failing, but because he was tired. Businesses like this change hands that way more often than people think. No broker. No bidding war. One conversation over coffee, a price agreed on a napkin, a lawyer to handle the paperwork. The laundromat grossed about $18,000 a month. After utilities, maintenance, and the part-time attendant who'd been there for years, Tom netted somewhere between $8,000 and $10,000. He ran it himself for 4 months. Same reason as before. Understand the business before you hand it to anyone. What breaks most often? Which machines generate the most service calls? What the customers actually need? There's a rhythm to a laundromat that you can only feel if you've spent time in one. The morning rush from the apartment complex 2 blocks away. The Wednesday afternoon lull. The one dryer that runs hot and needs to be checked every week or someone complains. By month 5, Tom had trained a manager and stepped back. 2 units, 2 operators. Tom wasn't running either of them. He was spending about 4 hours a week reviewing numbers, handling anything the operators couldn't resolve, and looking for the third acquisition. This is where most people, if they've made it this far, ask the wrong question. They ask, which business should I buy next? Tom had stopped thinking that way. The question wasn't which business, it was, which business has the same structural demand, runs on a small team, and doesn't require me to be the person in the middle of every decision? The laundromat answered yes to all 3. So had the Stripe machine. He wasn't looking for a specific industry. He was looking for a shape. Here's what the math looks like when you run the sequence 8 times. 8 units, each one generating somewhere between $8,000 and $20,000 a month in net cash flow after the operator cost. The range is wide because the businesses are different. A storage facility clears more than a window cleaning crew, which clears more than a single laundromat. But even at the low end, if every unit averages $9,000 a month after extraction costs, the total is $72,000 a month. That's $864,000 a year. Push the average unit to $12,000 and you're past $1 million a year. Tom's portfolio, at the point where it crossed $1 million a month, had 11 units, not 8. A few of them were clearing significantly more than average. Worth being honest about what this costs. The operator layer takes roughly 40 to 50% of what the business would make with you running it directly. That's not a small number. On a $15,000 a month business, you're handing over $6,000 a month in exchange for not being there. Over a year, that's $72,000 in what most people would call profit, going to someone else instead. What you get in return is the ability to run the sequence again and again and again. Without the operator install, you're capped at whatever one person can physically manage. With it, the only constraint is capital, and the businesses are generating the capital themselves. This is what Cody Sanchez has been talking about publicly for years. The boring business acquisition model. Laundromats, parking lots, storage units, car washes. Businesses that people walk past every day and never think about owning. Not because they're not worth owning, because they're not impressive enough to attract the attention of people who've been trained to value impressive things. That's not a problem. That's the opportunity. The final number isn't the point. The sequence is the point. 1 unit, extracted, becomes 2. 2 become 4. The empire isn't the businesses. It's the pattern you repeat. Tom didn't pop champagne when the number hit $1 million a month. He checked the dashboard, closed the laptop, and took the dog for a walk. By the time the portfolio crossed that number, it had been building for 5 years. The moment itself wasn't dramatic. It was the 13th or 14th time a monthly total came in higher than the month before. The number was there. Nothing felt different. Which was, in its own way, the point. What had changed was everything before the number. 5 years earlier, Tom was working 80 hours a week, billing $6,000 a month, answering client emails at 11 p.m., and grinding toward a ceiling he could already see. Now he owned 11 businesses, employed about 30 people across them, and worked roughly 6 hours a week reviewing reports and taking calls from operators when something needed a decision. He hadn't built something impressive, he'd built something durable. There's a difference. Here's what's worth sitting with before you close this tab. The businesses Tom built are not special. Parking lot striping exists in every city. Laundromats exist in every neighborhood. Storage facilities, window cleaning crews, pressure washing operations. These are everywhere. They're not waiting to be discovered. They're sitting there, running quietly, making money for people whose names you'll never see on a Forbes list. The reason most ambitious people don't build this kind of wealth isn't that they can't find the businesses. It's that the businesses don't look like wealth from the outside. The same logic runs in digital assets. The AI influencer model I mentioned at the start is one version of this. You build one account, automate the content, let it run on affiliate commissions, then build another. No physical location, no equipment, no operator in the traditional sense. The AI handles what an operator would handle in a physical business. If you want to see what that looks like specifically, I've been running a version of it, and the link is in the description. It's closer to the Stripe machine model than anything else I've found online. But here's what I actually want to leave you with. Tom went to that networking event looking for better clients. What he found instead was a question he hadn't thought to ask. He'd been so focused on building something impressive that he'd never stopped to ask whether impressive was the right target. Wealth building, at its most basic level, is not about who works hardest. It's not about who has the best strategy, or the most impressive brand, or the cleanest funnel. It's about who stops competing in the wrong contest first. The businesses no one is fighting over are still there. The sequence still works. The only thing that changes is who's paying attention. Most people aren't. That's not a problem. That's the opportunity.